those rounds. The troopers facilitated her being taken to the hospital, and as a result of this, and in response to this incident, our UHP troopers, working with our State Bureau of Investigation agents, initiated an extensive and incredibly aggressive investigation into identifying the suspects and the people that were involved in actually firing the shots at this young lady in her vehicle. That investigation spanned over 2 weeks. It involved Herculean efforts, exhausting every resource that we had available to us, and our State Bureau Investigation agents utilizing expertise and technology and equipment and capabilities that they have, every bit of that to be able to do this. They had agents assigned to this full time over 2 weeks to identify who this person was and be able to bring them to justice. Yesterday morning, in the early morning hours, a culmination of that investigation resulted in our Highway Patrol troopers and agents from the State Bureau of Investigation serving a search warrant at a residence in Weber County. As a result of that search warrant, who we believe to be the primary suspect, the driver of that motorcycle, as well as the rider, were taken into custody. And additional evidence was located. And I'm going to allow Captain Troy Denny with the State Bureau of Investigations to provide a little bit more information here in a minute into what the details of that were. Their effort today in bringing everyone together is to bring attention to this incredibly difficult and horrible incident that took place, but also how that results into what we see on the freeways when things that we call an incidents and interactions between vehicles that culminate in what is generally referred to as road rage occurs on our roadways. This frequently involves something as simple as a simple traffic violation that culminates into a direct aggressive interaction between one or more vehicles or two or more vehicles. And in worst case scenarios, we see what we've seen 2 weeks ago with someone actually making the decision to produce a firearm and to fire shots at another vehicle. We see that with more frequency than what we would dare to be able to say is even something that we wouldn't be worried about. We're incredibly proud of our state troopers and our agents and their efforts and their ability to bring the person involved in this to justice, but we really want to bring significant attention to the fact that this is unacceptable behavior. When we're talking about road rage, the things we're talking about direct interactions, aggressive interactions, or direct aggressive actions while driving on a freeway or driving on a roadway directed at another person or another vehicle. These actions can simply be aggressive driving, using aggressive tactics or aggressive maneuvers towards the other vehicle. They can result in physical confrontations. They can result in brandishing of a firearm. They can ultimately result in actually firing a firearm at another person, another vehicle on the freeway. Let's be absolutely clear. All of these are absolutely unacceptable. When we're talking about things that are happening on the freeway, at no time is anything going on the freeway is a physical confrontation going to make that better. At no time is brandishing a firearm from a vehicle at another vehicle, another person, acceptable, or is that going to improve the situation at all? There's all kinds of options. There's thousands of options other than letting yourself being pulled into these kinds of confrontations. And the really disturbing part about this is these are people who, in any other circumstances, probably wouldn't respond in the same way. But for whatever reason, in the dynamics involved and the emotion that gets involved in driving a vehicle and the frustrations that get out of control, we see people do things like this they would do under no circumstances. And it is absolutely unacceptable. The other message we absolutely want to send out there is when these kinds of things happen, when someone loses control of their emotions or their capability to control themselves to where they do things like an assault or brandishing a firearm or firing at another vehicle, when these things happen, we are going to exhaust every single resource we have as aggressively as possible to identify those people who are involved and make sure that they're held accountable for those kinds of actions. Again, absolutely unacceptable. With that, I'm going to turn some time over to Captain Denny. He's going to go into a little bit more details of the investigation that resulted in the successful apprehension of the suspects involved in this, and then we'll take questions after that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Troy Denny. I'm the captain over the State Bureau of Investigation. I'll give just a quick little history lesson of SBI. SBI is the investigative arm of the Department of Public Safety. It's the sister agency to the Utah Highway Patrol. Essentially, we're the detective division for the state. Our mission is to provide professional investigative services to all people in Utah and to maintain the trust of the public while doing so. I have a couple of notes I'll just kind of refer to in regard to this particular incident. But in terms of investigative techniques, SBI will use any and all legal, ethical, and professional investigative techniques to identify and apprehend individuals who commit crimes and try and evade justice. This particular incident is alarming because it could have happened to any of us. I would dare say that there's not a single driver on the roads today who at some point hasn't inadvertently cut somebody off or missed somebody in their blind spot. And in this particular incident, an 18-year-old driver, was seriously injured. And that could have been any of our loved ones. It could have been our mothers, our sisters, our family members. So it's extremely alarming and scary in that the suspect's actions were extremely random and violent. But I want to talk about the resolution of this case, and we used a number of techniques. They're not secret techniques, it's just good old-fashioned investigative techniques. Primarily we used some mapping technology. Our SIAC, our Statewide Intelligence and Analysis Center, used some techniques to map potential motorcycles that matched the description of the one involved in this particular case. Our agents were able to track the movements of these individuals through canvassing techniques. They approached the community and they were able to use private and individual community members' surveillance cameras and camera footage and track the individuals' movements and route. They followed the clues and just followed the evidence, and ultimately they were able to match the suspect's vehicle to the suspect's home, and ultimately it was the public's help that helped us to identify who these individuals were. So we really do want to thank the public's cooperation and trust in law enforcement. We think that that was a key item in being able to resolve this particular case and identify these individuals. So with that, I think we'd turn it over to your questions.
You guys have any questions that?
Can you guys elaborate on the murder, the listed murder charge or referred charge?
What would you like to know?
Was this not attempted murder?
I would say so, yes.
But the charge in the probable cause statement says murder,
I would suspect that it should be attempted murder.
so that's a mistake.
Yeah. I don't think the individual in question has died, so. Seriously injured.
Were you able to get any surveillance video of this incident or anything?
So there was an individual on the freeway who witnessed the incident take place. That individual provided us with surveillance video or dash camera video footage. And in following that particular witness's movements on the freeway, we were able to track them to a particular exit off of the freeway, at which point the public's help became invaluable to us because we were able to use doorbell cameras, surveillance cameras from residences, and they were able to project and track the individual's movements along a particular route through Weber and Davis County, or Davis and then into Weber County, ultimately to essentially the suspect's homes.
It seems like more and more people are getting doorbell and dash cameras. Can you comment on how that's played a role in your investigations like this one?
Well, first of all, I would say that we have a unique relationship with the community and law enforcement in Utah. We have an extreme amount of support and trust from the community. So as we were trying to track this individual's movements and we approached individuals, they were more than willing and eager to share their camera footage with us in an event to apprehend these individuals. And almost without fault, everybody that we talked to spoke about kind of the terrifying nature of this. It could have been their own family members who were involved in this. Again, I would recognize the fact that there's any number of driving mistakes that happen to every driver. Every day we miss people in our blind spots. And that does not justify anybody escalating the situation to the point that they're shooting at another individual. So It's just an investigative tool that we have the public support on.
How long did this incident last from what you've observed in video and witness statements?
Seconds, literally seconds. The footage kind of, it portrays kind of an erratic movement of the vehicle and then a motorcycle chasing aggressively after it. And the video footage actually shows the individual firing rounds at the other car.
And that's from a witness,
Yes,
not the person in the vehicle?
correct.
In the probable cause statement, there's gang affiliation mentioned with the suspect. Have you had any prior interactions with this person?
Not this person, no.
Will there be charges to the wife as well?
We anticipate screening charges with and through the the prosecutor's office. Yes.
How far from the incident the suspect lived, or where you arrested?
The incident
Just how many
occurred.
years?
The incident occurred near the Layton Hills Mall, and then the individual has a residence in Roy, Utah, kind of on the border of, well, the middle of Roy. I'm guesstimating about 10 miles.
Are both husband and wife in custody, or were they just both taken in for questioning?
At the completion of our investigation yesterday, the male individual was booked into jail, and the female individual was released from our custody pending screening charges through the prosecutor's office.
Is there anyone else in the car with the 18-year-old at the time?
Not that I know of.
Shot twice in the face.
There are 2 gunshot injuries to her face, yes.
How is she doing now?
As far as I know, she's extremely traumatized by it. She's affected seriously by it.
How did she, was there any swerving? How did she pull over, after this happened?
This is kind of a remarkable set of events, and I don't want to speak for her, but it appears that she remained calm and collected and drove herself to a trusted individual's home, who then transported her to the hospital.
How important is, in these incidents of road rage, how important is witnesses? If you see these things.
Again, I would speak to the extraordinary relationship that law enforcement in general has, with the state of Utah and the citizens of the state of Utah. We can't be in all places at once. We don't have surveillance cameras on the citizenry of Utah. If it wasn't for the cooperation of citizens in Utah, there would be many, many things that go unprosecuted and crimes unsolved.
One of my last questions is this road rage, it just keeps coming up. It seems like, more and more frequently. Can you talk about that increase and why this might be happening in our state specifically?
No, I couldn't speak specifically to the increase in the numbers or the reason why, but I can say that the Utah Department of Public Safety, the State Bureau of Investigation, the SIAC, we have tools available to us, and we will use any and all tools that are legal, ethical, and professional to apprehend these individuals.
That might be also good for criminal rapid as well.
Thank you. And just re-emphasizing how proud we are of the incredible work that our State Bureau of Investigation's done. These are state troopers working as investigators, doing amazing work and dedicating an incredible amount of effort to making sure we bring these people to justice. Talking specifically about road rage and things that are associated to road rage and things we can actually quantify, which is really difficult. Road rage isn't currently defined statutorily as a criminal violation. There are violations that when you'll come into a culmination that describe roadway and meet what people generally define as that. Obviously, brandishing a firearm, shooting from a vehicle, reckless driving, speeding, brake checking another vehicle, aggressive lane changes. All those things can be part of what we would all generally recognize as what we believe is road rage. And when those things are specifically targeted towards another vehicle or another person in doing those things, and that's where we start seeing road rage. And it goes beyond just aggressive driving and actually turns into what we generally are referring to as road rage. We have seen way more frequency of this, and the best place we can actually gather data, because road rage itself isn't currently defined as a crime, it is defined in crash reporting statistics. And so when we looked at our crash reporting statistics, we had our Highway Safety Office pull some statistics over the last 6 years. Over the last 6 years, between 700 and 800 different crashes where an investigating officer got on scene and based on all of the information they were able to collect, determined that crash was directly contributed to by road rage or aggressive driving, one of those two. And those are classified, so that's part of that in there. In those crashes, over over the 3 years prior to 2020, we averaged about between 10 and 15 fatalities as a result of that, where a fatal crash occurred. After complete investigation, officers determined that the significant contributor to that was either aggressive driving or road rage, which the actions in those two things are the same. It's just how they're targeted that becomes the difference. Since 2020, the last 3 years, 2020, 21, and 22, the fatalities, the people that have died in crashes directly as a result of what we would classify as road rage or aggressive driving has risen to, on average, 27. So a significant increase in the number of fatalities. If you actually look at that crash data, you see more significant increases in both, in not just the fatalities, but also injury crashes where serious injuries were performed. There's a little bit, to put a little bit of interpretation to that, those will be crashes where there's going to be very thorough investigations done. Those won't be just really quick, gather the information, exchange information, and get them going, but crashes where there's a lot of investigation going on, where they actually do a lot of witness follow-up. And so the likelihood of actually being able to determine those things is much better when you're looking at those kinds of crashes.
Was that 27 number from 2020? Like,
That was an average. So it fluctuated. It was all above 20, but fluctuating over 2020, 2021, and 2022, and we can actually provide you with that data as well. We've got a data sheet that'll kind of display that. Some other things that are kind of really significant in there, we looked at and just kind of looking at the data we could look at right now, and we're working right now on a deeper dive and a statewide look at all of this data, but just pulling the things that the Highway Patrol has been involved in, the things that SBI would ultimately be doing investigations on. Over the last 3 years, over the last 6 years actually, on average, we've investigated in excess of 30 instances where someone has chosen to display a firearm in conjunction with their interactions on the roadway, which doesn't sound like a big number, but it really kind of is when you think 30 different times someone made the decision that the best thing for me to do at this moment is to take a firearm out and show it to somebody else. Absolutely unacceptable in a driving conditions. There's no time when that is going to make things better. There's all kinds of opportunities to disengage, to create distance, to call 911, to do a lot of different things other than continue an interaction that results and culminates in that kind of interaction. In addition to that, we've actually been able to document specifically where we've investigated 6 different times where shots were fired, on average 6 times in the last 3 years where shots were fired on the freeway. It wasn't just displaying a firearm, but they make the decision to actually fire at another vehicle. Those are disturbing statistics when you look at the culmination of what road rage is. Getting back to this is all absolutely unacceptable. There are all kinds of options. When you find yourself in this kind of situation where either you're observing road rage or maybe you're becoming involved in that, where all of a sudden an interaction with a vehicle turns into something where there's targeted interactions back and forth and they start becoming aggressive, they start becoming violent, they start becoming confrontational, disengage. You can actually pull yourself into a situation where you go from being a victim to being someone who's actually culpable for a crime in those situations as well. Don't do that. Create distance. If you're seeing this, be a good witness, like Captain Denny said. Help us be able to identify those people that are involved in this and put it into it and hold them accountable for what they're doing. Call 911. Get a hold of law enforcement. Give us the opportunities. Collect as much information as available to you. What kind of vehicle are you looking at? What kind of occupants are in the vehicle? Can you get a license plate number? That kind of information exponentially increases our agents' ability to actually be successful in these investigations. Bringing this all back to the incident we're talking about right now, this started, at worst, with a single traffic violation that culminated into an interaction between 2 vehicles that resulted in someone firing at another, at an 18-year-old girl by herself in a vehicle, driving to some way to be able to meet someone else. From a single, at worst, a single traffic violation, how we get to there, it's really difficult to follow that mindset, but it happens. And it's absolutely unacceptable. And as we said before, when it does happen, we will exhaust every resource we have to hold those people involved accountable.
That'll conclude today's event. We've had multiple requests for video. Right now, that video is not available as part of evidence that we are considering. So, at a later date, that is a possibility. So, if you have any needs or anything, we do have some data sheets. So make sure to grab those before you leave.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
I'm just warmed up now if you want to do a retake. Good to go.